I cannot see that.
That's good. Boris, the floor is yours.
Is everybody okay now?
Yeah.
So let's make a start. Okay. Stephan, am I right to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. My name is Aris Sintetos. I'm a professor of decision science at Cardiff University and currently serve as Vice President of the International Society for Inventories Research. In fact, I should say as co-vice president. I share the role with Ruth Center from the University of Groningen. And it is absolutely wonderful to chair this webinar on behalf of the ISIR Society. Thank you very much for joining. I know that people, they will keep on coming up, but we make a start and make sure that we give to Stephan as much time as possible. For those of you not familiar with the Society, this is a terrific community of scientists, both academics and practitioners, with an explicit interest in inventory management and optimization and various peripheral subjects, forecasting, for example, which is also Stephan's expertise, and as it happens, mine too. The Society was introduced in the early 80s. We have a terrific biennial symposium and an equally terrific biennial PhD summer school. I will say a few more words about the former at the end of the webinar. Abstract submission is currently open, and the symposium is going to take place excuse me, later this summer in Budapest. We also run one major academic and one practitioner webinar every year, and I am delighted to introduce this year's practitioner speaker, who is a very close colleague and a very dear friend of mine, who I know for very many years now, as it happens, more than 20, I think, and with whom I have the pleasure to work on various capacities through various government-funded projects and joint publications, and had the opportunity and the pleasure to spend some lovely time in conferences around the world. About Stephan, I don't think I have met somebody working in industry with so much knowledge and so much commitment to advancing knowledge. Stephan has been researching and working on forecasting for retail inventories for over 20 years now. I did visit him back in 2008 when he was working for simulation analysis and forecasting. That was in a lovely place near the Lake Constance in Switzerland, and that was a terrific provider of ordering and forecasting software. Later on, this was acquired by SAP, and Stephan still works with this wonderful company, serving some of the largest retailers worldwide. In parallel, and as I mentioned before, in parallel to his work in industry, he researches forecasting with a particular focus on retail applications and on forecast error metrics. He's an honorary researcher at the Center for Marketing Analytics and Forecasting at the Lancaster University Management School. And he also serves on the editorial board of both the International Journal of Forecasting, which is the scientific publication of the International Institute of Forecasters, and the Foresight, which is the practitioner publication of the Institute. He's also a fellow of the International Institute of Forecasters. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stephan. Just for everybody's info, the meeting is recording. I hope this is absolutely fine for everybody. We will keep this to about 40 or 45 minutes, so to about 10 to 11 UK time or 10 to 12 CET. We then allow 10 minutes for questions. Please post your questions in the chat box. I will collate these questions and pass over to Stephan. And as I said before, we will close with some more comments about the forthcoming conference of the International Society for Inventory Research in Budapest. Stephan, again, thank you very much for joining us. An absolute pleasure and honor. Over to you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much, Aris, for inviting me and for these lovely words of introduction. Let's get to do because there is just so much to talk about. So I have a couple of sections that I can skip later on, but I'll try to impart as much knowledge to you as I can in this limited amount of time. Okay, stock control in retail. So just a couple of one advantage of my job is I can just go shopping anywhere in the world and I can take things that work or that do not work. And this is just one non-SAP customer, that's important, where things did not work out. So you see what happens when bad. No product here. The eggs that were on promotion for £1 at for the half dozen are just out of stock, and so on and so forth. This all came from one particular supermarket or convenience store, essentially was a My Local. And if you're not familiar with this chain, that may be because it's gone out of business. It went out of business 1 year after I took all these pictures. So I went online and found out why this place went out of business, not just this one store, but the entire chain of a couple of hundred stores. And the consensus was that on shelf availability was bad. And I particularly liked this one comment at the bottom right. No Daily Mirrors were available yet again, which is like the most common newspaper in the UK. For goodness sakes, how difficult is it to order Britain's most popular newspaper? My dog would make a better job at being manager. So you see that this is stock control in retail is an emotional topic for some people, as you see. So this particular customer apparently was unhappy. So let's see whether we can make a better job of this than this gentleman's dog. I'm not saying that this gentleman is this gentleman, but they're equally unhappy. We'll be talking about forecasting in retail because all stock control in retail needs to start with forecasting, as does pretty much anything where we plan for the future, which is why I like forecasting so much. I'm going to talk about stock control. Inventory record inaccuracy. Aris has just left the screen, but I know that he's been working on IRI for a long time. A very important topic here. We will talk about perishables. We'll hope to talk about distribution centers, and we'll have a conclusion at the end. Let's talk about forecasting in retail. This is a show over and over and over again. I'm sorry about that, but it's just so very nice. And I know it's ancient history, but this is a timeless classic. It's what's called as tomatoes, right? So, and believe me, the sales behavior of tomatoes hasn't changed very much in the last 20 years. I plan on keeping this time series for the rest of my career. We see stuff, well, these are daily sales in one supermarket in kilos. So just think about this, like 600 kilograms of tomatoes being sold every single day in this one single supermarket. So a lot of tomatoes out around here. We So a day of year pattern, so slightly higher sales in summer than in winter. We also see day of week patterns. All these high peaks up here, those are all Saturdays, and we'll see that on the next slide. We also see, when you dig into that, you see some price effects and promotion effects, but I'm not going to go into that because we're not talking about forecasting here. Here's a different time series that's from the M5 competition, one particular product in one particular store. This is the time series of sales that we see. We see a couple of things over here. This is probably a stock out. We'll talk about stock outs later on. And what I want to draw attention to right now is this plot at the bottom. So what did I do here? I just took these data and divided up by day of week from Sunday through Saturday. The week starts on Sunday in the US. It starts on Monday in the rest of the world, but the US is always a little different. What we see here is a flipped or turned around bar chart of how often we sold on a Sunday: 0 units, 1, 2, 5, and so on, up to 15 units per day. It goes up to 15 somewhere hereabouts. I also added a box plot here and the means. The means are these dots that are connected by a line. That's the mean per day, mean sales per day. And the box plot is just a standard box plot with a median. And the important part here is that you really see the day of week pattern in here. You see higher sales on Sundays and on Saturdays than during the rest of the week. And that's important for stock control, of course. Patterns. You also see the day of year patterns that we just saw in tomatoes, not so much in this product here. In other products, it's important. But what you also see is just look at the width of the boxes and you see that it's not just that the average sales or also the median sales change over the day of the week. It's also the fact that the variance differs, right? So the boxes are much wider on Sunday and on Saturday than during the rest of the week, and the whiskers extend much further. They extend up to 10 year and to whatever that is, 8 or something, and they just extend to 5 or a year. So, and this is one of the key things in retail forecasting. You have day of week patterns that apply not only to average sales, but also to the variance in sales and to higher moments. And that's important once you need to stock up for safety stocks, and especially if you're talking about perishables, because the strawberries that you just put in on Sunday, where you put in a high safety stock first to achieve your service level, because you have a higher variance on Sunday, those strawberries will perhaps not be sellable on Monday or on Tuesday anymore. And that's the kind of tension that you labor under in forecasting and for retail. There's also tons of other things here. And as I said, there's entire presentations about forecasting in retail that I'm not going to go into. There are all kinds of promotions that you have in retail that where retailers try to drive demand and shape demand. Actually, this very common M5 data set is not very useful in this regard, because this M5 data set, which is probably the most common daily retail sales data set that's used nowadays and that everybody uses to death. See my very last slide, so stick around until the end. That comes from Walmart. Walmart is an everyday low price retailer. They work very little with promotions, and the only price changes that they have is essentially markdowns to move product out the door. But most other retailers, the vast majority of retailers, really actively use all kinds of promotions, from temporary price reductions to buy one, get one, to buy N of X at X% off, get M units of a product Y, completely different unit Y at Y% off. That's my personal abbreviation here. We're not using that in our marketing or training documents, but I just like it because it really explains cases the complexity that we have in here. You have conditions, you have coupons, you have lots of tactics, you have your suppression effects on regular sales, you have calendar events, Christmas things, and they all have impacts not only on average sales, which are the focal point for most forecasters, but also on higher moments, on variances, in the end on safety stocks that you need to put in. And this is all lurking in the background, and it's all not in our key focus today, because we're talking about stock control, because we're in the society for inventory research, so stock control is the important part. So how does stock control work in retail, or at least where we work? So we have this little thing here that we're going to work through in the next couple of slides. Time is to the right. Stocks are going up and down, and you see we do have negative stocks. Can happen in retail, at least in terms of the calculation here. And we have a couple of dates that are called out. That's 01, that's the order date, today's order date, the first order date, 01. Product that we order today will become available at some later date at A1. Availability point 1, and that includes delivery to the store and probably another day for product to move from the store ramp to the actual shelf where the end customer can buy it. Because if you walk into a supermarket and you want to buy something, it won't help you if the stock is in the back room or still on the ramp, and so you need a little delta here. And we also have the next availability date. The next order date, we don't care about very much, but the next availability date, that's important. Why? Because what we order today now, here, will only become available here. So until that point in time, we cannot change anything. We may have the current stock. Oops, okay, in a second. We have the current stock, and we may have stock in transit, but we cannot influence matters until here. But what we do today needs to last us until A2, until the second availability date. And this is the way of thinking that we have in here. All right, so what we need forecasts for aggregate demand per SKU, per stock keeping unit, across these two periods. And I'm simplifying here, and I'm simplifying by a lot, because really you have time points in here where you have other stock events like open orders coming in, fixed orders moving out, spoilage, and so on and so forth. So, but it's already complicated enough. So let's just stick with the simple example here. We may have something like a probability density for demands over this period here and over this period over here. And as you see, these densities are quite different. That's exactly what I was talking about. You have not only changes in the mean, you also have changes in variance. Point 1, point 2, they're all discrete. Not all demands in retail are discrete, but the vast majority are. You also have stuff that's sold by weight, like fruit, vegetables, meat, but the vast majority is consumer packaged goods that are sold in units, or prepackaged perishables that are also sold in units, and so on. So typically we'll work with discrete data. Typically, we'll also work with negative binomial distributional assumptions here, but that's something you can think about or not. All right, so how do we now do our stock control here? The idea is really we're at A1. We want to know when to figure out how much do we order today. Well, we have a certain stock today. Let's hope we have a certain stock today. We assume we have a certain stock today. We start with 5 units, and we have this kind of a flipped bar chart because right now we're working off an assumption of 100% certainty that we have 5 units, and that's something that you may want to keep in the back of your head for later on. Okay, so so what's going to happen? Well, we can essentially we can discount, or we can project the stock forward, and that happens probabilistically by just taking this demand density or probability mass function, just flipping it around and attaching it to these 5 units here, because with a certain probability of whatever 20%, we have a demand of 0, and then of course we end up at the same stock as we have today, 5 units. With a certain probability, we have a demand of 1, then we end up with a stock of 4. So it's just this kind of flipped bar chart that gives us the probability of having a certain stock on hand at A1 where the next delivery becomes available. And we start seeing the first problems here that perhaps demand exceeds current stock. So perhaps we end up with a stock of -1 here. That would correspond to having a demand of 6 units. Well, bad news for that person wanting that 6th unit. They won't find anything because there's nothing here. So what we need to do is we keep in mind that we just have a certain probability of 1 unit's lost sales, and we'll talk about lost sales later on as well. So just keep that as a KPI. We are certainly someone likely of having 1, 2, 3 lost sales, and then we truncate this stock projection at 0, because in retail we typically don't have back orders. That's one of the key differentiators between retail and many B2B things. You simply don't have back orders, at least not in brick and mortar. I should have said that most of what I'm talking about here is brick and mortar, but very much also applies to online retail, because if you're online, if you go to Amazon or wherever you want to go, you know how much stock you have, and the customer sees that, and they typically don't order something that is not in stock. But there are wrinkles here, but let's stick with the simple brick and mortar approach. Okay, if we don't do anything and we don't order anything today, then this is the projected stock distribution at A1. And then, of course, we have the demands from A1 to A2. This is exactly the probability density, the probability mass function, the forecasted PMF. And that is then convolved with this stock distribution over here. And that means that we expect, or we project, the expectation is just thing here, we project our stock to be like this at A2 under the assumption of not ordering anything. And then, of course, we can again say, okay, if we don't order anything, then this is the how much lost sales we expect. This is the service level we expect. Going to come to that in a second, and so on and so forth. Just keep that in mind. And now we say, okay, perhaps we can order. And typically in retail, you cannot just order in eaches. You can order in full packages, perhaps in packages of 4 or 6 or 8. Those are common logistical units, because no retailer wants to handle single units. You may want to handle a single car. You don't want to handle a single bottle of shampoo. So you want to order perhaps 4 units, because that's the smallest logistical unit. Well, that just means that the stock distribution at goods receipts gets shifted up by 4 units. And now we have this kind of stock distribution. We still truncate here, because we lose sales for out of stock before the new stock arrives. So we have to first truncate and then shift up. So we do that, and we again convolve with the future demand, and we end up here, and we can say, okay, conditional on ordering 1 carton of 4 units. This is the stock distribution that we expect. Store service level, store lost sales, store average sales, average stock, and so on and so forth. Do the same with, well, perhaps we can order 2 packages of 8 units, and then that just means we shift everything up by 8 units and then project forward again. And now we're happy. We almost have no lost sales. A little something here. You see the little break in the line here, and that means that we still have a small probability of having lost sales here. And just do that for all candidates. and collect all these KPIs that we have in here. And as I said, it gets a little more complicated because you have additional availability, stock in transit, open orders. You have spoilage, which we're going to come to in a second. We have these fixed orders. We store and process these KPIs per order amount. And then we try to find feasible order amounts that obey constraints like minimum service level, maximum ranges of coverage, maximum stock levels, and so on. And then we mix that among all the hundreds or thousands of SKUs that we have in the stock optimization that I'm not even going to talk about here, because of course there is a whole long tail of optimization happening afterwards. Problem here is that these convolutions are costly, and since we're in a discrete case, and since we have all these censorings at zero stocks, there are typically no closed form solutions for everything. It's already hard enough to say, okay, if we assume every day's sale to be neck bin distributed and independent, even then the total of sales is not neck bin distributed anymore, except in some unrealistically specific cases. So you have all kinds of points where the pure theory kind of breaks down. Kind of extend this in principle. Right now we're working under a neck bin distributional assumption, which makes sense for much of retail, not all of it. We currently assume deterministic initial stock, and that's something that Aris can talk about because stock is not deterministic. If your perpetual inventory says you have 5 units, then chances are you have fewer than 5 units or more than 5 units. So you can essentially just take the entire approach and replace this initial bar by a full distribution of initial stocks. Okay, now the question, of course, is why do you do all this rigmarole? Why don't you just optimize the costs or the profits in your entire stock the stock control system? Well, the short answer to that is nobody knows their costs. That is sometimes a little surprising and jarring to hear. But once you, because I mean, it's a business, right? A retailer is a business, and they should know their cost structure. But once you dig into that, once you talk to retailers and say, okay, I'd like to optimize your stock so you have your lowest costs and highest profits, I need these cost factors, and you start to talk to people, and it gets interesting quite quickly. I just realized that I forgot one thing that I should be putting in here. So start with costs of overstocks. If you have too much stock, whatever too much means, well, okay, let's assume, what does it mean that at the end of the period you have stock left over that you couldn't sell right before the next delivery arrives? How much does that hurt you? Well, it's a cost of overstock. It's working capital. Working capital does have a cost, and we all learn about that in our accounting classes. It's typically costed by WACC, weighted average cost of capital. So you have an average of the cost of debt and equity. And then you start digging into the details here. Okay, you have a debt for a business, typically long-term debt at lower interest rates, short-term debt at smaller interest rates. Which debt finances one additional bottle of shampoo in your store shelf? You start asking those questions, people start looking at you strangely. And even the cost of equity, well, that's something that comes down from on top from controlling or from the CFO. We want to achieve a 20% return of equity. And then you ask back, well, why is it 20? Why is it not 15? Why is it not 25? Well, it's aspirational. It's not real. It's something that we want to aim at. It's the returns that we want to give to our shareholders. So again, it's not a real cost. It's an accounting fiction, essentially. And it could just as well be different one way or the other. And once you go into all of these, and actually, I don't want to go into all of these cost functions here or cost factors that go in here. Every single one, once you try to grab it, you find out it's a wet bar of soap. You try to grab it and it just slips away from you. And that is part of why I personally have a bit of a problem with much of research, because much of research just assumes cost functions. It's like, okay, we assume that a unit of understock is 10 times as costly as a unit of overstock, and here's our results, and my pet method achieves costs that are 5% lower than the benchmark. And I say, okay, lovely, and how does that work when these cost differentials are not so well known? Do you do a scenario analysis? Because differences between costs of over and under stock can be vast. They can differ by retailer. If you're a discounter, one of the four-letter discounters that I don't know whether I can say their name, but you typically have just one kind of flour. Their entire business model is premised on having few SKUs and having a big turnover on those low stocks. Everybody likes low stocks, but they typically turn that over very quickly and just have one package of flour. If that one package of flour is out of stock, then there is no substitute, and then you lose the sale. And in a normal retail, a normal supermarket, you have wheat flour in the 1 kilogram bag, the 5 kilogram bags. You have 3 different brands. You have organic versus conventional. So if the one SKU, one stock keeping unit is out of stock, then the customer may be unhappy, and the loss of goodwill over here is very hard to quantify, but they can at least switch to a different product. They have a substitute. They may buy the larger pack size, they may go to a different brand, and there's entire research about the behavior of customers that, again, I think is a little too coarse, not fine-grained enough, because that will, again, change with the product. And so a particular stock out costs you money depends on the substitution behavior, and you can actually earn more margin, more profit if people switch from the store brand that is out of stock to a branded product that is in stock, that is more costly. If they only need to do that once or twice, they'll be fine. They may even find, okay, the branded product is so much better, I'll always switch to the branded product. Or if that happens over and over again, at some point, people just switch to a different retailer. And so the costs here is so hard to find out that we've figured out it makes more sense to work in terms of achieve a certain target service level. Again, this target service level falls from heaven. It's not, it's something that somebody cooked up in the back of their heads. And if it results in too much stock in a gut feeling way, then they might revisit it, but it's not like this is set in any scientific way. So I'm sorry about this. I know we're talking about science here, but I'm the practitioner, as Aris said, so I can say stuff like that. So essentially, it all boils down into this lovely little saying that sometimes you tend to measure with a micrometer, mark with chalk, and then with an axe. Or in terms of forecasting for inventory control, it's forecasting with a state-of-the-art tool, but using features that are of questionable quality. And it's interesting how little knowledge retailers have about their own promotions and how badly these can be kept in the system. And in the end, we always surround 2 pallets and just call it a day. Yeah, that's kind of. This is the kind of thing that I have in the back of my head when I read papers in the International Journal of Forecasting. Little problem here also is that we're in inventory control, and there's all this entire zoo of service level definitions. And I'm sorry if I got some of these wrong, because honestly, I'm not so interested in most of these. And I'm sure that some people know much more about this than I do. But the problem is much of these service level is simply inapplicable in retail, especially in brick and mortar. You don't know the full demand. You only know how much was sold. You don't know whether people had demand that exceeded what was sold, because they will typically not tell you, I wanted to buy something and was not there. They'll just not find it, buy a substitute, and just walk out the store. So you don't see full demand. You don't know people's shopping list. So you don't even know what your order fill rate can be, because you don't know it. You can. So the only service level definition that is more or less useful in retail is the in-stock rate, or 1 minus the out-of-stock probability, which works up to inventory record inaccuracy. And so actually, this is a wonderful segue to our next topic, inventory record inaccuracy, which is a major topic that's completely underappreciated. And that is why I like Aris so much and his co-authors with the work that they've been doing. So what's inventory record inaccuracy? You'd assume that a retailer knows how much product they have in stock. You would be wrong. It's always, you talk to people, well, I do forecasting for supermarkets, and your supermarket doesn't know how much stock they have in hand. people talk to you, people look at you strangely again. This is just, as I said, I can take pictures when I go shopping, and I just love that about my job. I'm always sent to buy oat flakes for my family because they seem to live off that. And the shelves were empty, and I asked the lady in the store, okay, why is this shelf empty? She pulled out her handheld. Aris, I'm going to send you the presentation afterwards. You don't need to take a picture of your screen. Anybody
This is the
just asked
habit.
me
This is the habit, Stephan.
Okay, well, and she looked at her handheld and said, well, the perpetual inventory, the PI says there are 15 units here and there are 30 units down here. And we both looked at that and said, well, that's the invisible oat flakes here, obviously. And this is inventory record inaccuracy. The inventory record says 15 or 30, and actual inventory is 0. And this gives us multiple problems, right? It's like a bag of wonders. It gives you multiple problems. In forecasting, you don't know whether historical sales were censored. And remember that one M5 data set that I showed at the very beginning. It had a short period of absolutely 0 sales, and that looked out of place. And this looks out of place is actually how we try to detect after the fact whether they were out of stocks. Works reasonably well for fast movers, has major issues with slow movers. You also have this NOS-BOS problem, not on shelf, but on stock. That's when product is in the back room and not in the shelf, which is nice. Your PI is correct, perhaps, but the product is not available for purchase for the customer. So it doesn't really help a lot. And in stock control, even if you get your forecasts right and they're not censored, if you don't know whether you have 5 or 2 on hand, how do you replenish? Here, if the forecast says, okay, you should fill up to a target service level of 12 units, and the PI says, okay, we have 15 units on hand, I don't need to do anything. I don't need to order anything. You don't order anything. You don't sell anything because there is actually physically nothing there. And then your sales go down. You have the effect that we like to call silent delisting. So the product is silently delisted. It's not going to be reordered because the forecasts are going to go down, down, down because you're not selling anything. So lovely. And I think that these problems are underappreciated. I think that most retailers have a far too optimistic idea of how good their PIs are. And it's always, well, we sell software. It's kind of hard for us to tell the customers your data are crap. So it's perhaps something to keep in the back of our heads. I love the way that IRI allows me to cite literature from criminology and criminal justice, because those are, they did a piece of research 10 years old by now, no matter, still holds, about the impact of self-checkout. So the cash registers where people do their own checking out, and that has people stealing. Stealing, theft is, of course, one of the major drivers of inventory record inaccuracy. Okay, but of course, I talked to my colleagues here, and they say, well, RI used to be a problem, but that's gotten better over time. I'm sure about that because it's an important topic and retailers are working on it. So I just picked out 2 papers. One of them is the classic, the Horatius and Raman, 2008, and the other one is destined to become a classic because it's by Yasin Rekik and Aris Sinteros and Christoph Glock, who actually also registered for this thing here. And so how did the percentage of SKUs with IRI, how did that develop over time? Well, in 2008, it was 65%. 65% of products had inaccurate inventories. Just let that sink in. 65% of SKUs, not 65% were correct, 65% were wrong. Okay, well, and how did that change over time? Did it become better? How much better did it become with artificial intelligence and RFID and increased visibility into the importance of the topic? Well, now it's 65%. Didn't change at all. I just loved seeing that. So I absolutely hope that this paper will be published very soon because it's not changing. Problem is still there. It's not going away. And why does it happen? Well, it happens because of stuff like that. As I said, I go shopping, and instead of helping people mess this up, I take a picture. I'm sorry, I really didn't help clean this up. It didn't happen to me. I just found it there. And the question really is, okay, who thinks that the store personnel will actually write off the exact number of milk cartons that broke here? I think they have other things to do and probably better things to do. So, and therefore IRI will simply not go away. It's going to stick around, and it's one problem. And you see that once you look at, well, some customers have historical PIs, and that's actually another problem. Many customers just keep today's probably perpetual inventory. They know how much stock they have today. They may not historicize it. And if you want to clean historical sales data of the effect of out of stocks, then you need the historical PIs. Some customers have them, and then you see stuff like this. Bottom, you see the actual sales. That was an automatic irrigation system. And on the top, you see in the red, you see the inventory in this store. And you see how you have sales, although the inventory is zero. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Sometimes you also have stuff like, here's the inventory. Those are the sales. And you see how you have movements in the inventory without any sales. Shouldn't happen, right? So, and sometimes you have quite negative inventories. It's just fun. These are all do-it-yourself products in a do-it-yourself store. So fun things here, negative stocks. Okay, talk about perishables. Actually, we have a lot of time. Love this here. Perishables, because there was part of the announcements. I wanted to talk about perishables, and I work in Switzerland, and so you get cheese. So we're not only talking about tomatoes and about do-it-yourself stuff and about broken milk cartons. You also talk about cheese. These are raclette cheese, and the important part about this here is this is a picture that I took actually in the supermarket right next to our office here, and I just went in there and randomly looked at the cheese, and I found 3 packets of different best buy dates. So November 11th, November 19th, November 29th. And so you already see that I don't know when I took this picture, but it was not long after that. As I see, 2024. And you see already different effects in here. And or let's walk back a second. Let's start with forecasting. Okay, what's the problem with perishables and forecasting? You typically have a lower target service level, especially for the ultra fresh products. You typically, at least in Europe, people will accept it when they walk into the store at 4 p.m. and they don't get fresh strawberries anymore, because they understand anything I don't sell today, I need to throw out as a retailer. So as a retailer, I'm going to aim at a lower target service level for the ultra perishable products. And so you have more censored historical sales. And you typically, again, have very inaccurate inventories in here. If you have fruit and vegetables, and those correlate with being perishables, fruit, vegetables, meat are perishables, and they're also sold by weight. And so it's typically even harder to keep PI up to date because, well, your apple falls down, it doesn't look nice anymore, it gets thrown away, it's not going to be taken out of the system. Your cheese loses weight by evaporation, and suddenly you have less cheese in terms of weight. And it's all problematic. Perishables are typically also one of the major targets for markdowns. So you have product that's almost near its best buy date. You mark it down by 25% or something. You sell it at a lower price. How do you deal with that in modeling and in forecasting? Markdown sales. It's not obvious, right? We have some customers that say, okay, we keep marked down sales. We keep them because those are sales, and we want to stock up to achieve sales, even if we have to sell it on markdowns, because we make sure that we always keep at least a little margin. And we have other customers that say, well, we don't want to fill up stock for product that only gets sold on markdowns later on because it's going to perish. So throw the marked down sales, throw them out. Don't keep them for modeling. And then, of course, you again have the lower service levels, more censoring. So it's multiple problems that kind of chase each other around in this area. In stock control, now we have the forecasting, now we have the stock control, or the interplay between the two. You need to account for the expiring product, and remember these extrapolations that we looked at with the flipped bar charts. At some point in between, you have product expiring, and you need to figure out, okay, how much do I need to throw out here? But in order to know how much you need to throw out because it expires, you need to understand what the customers bought first in, first out, or last in, first out. Because if they bought first in, first out, then you don't need to throw away as much product as if they bought last in, first out. And of course, the retailer knows that, and when they fill up the shelves, they put the new product at the back, so people don't grab the new product. They grab the old product first. And of course, the customers are not stupid, and they reach in the back and buy the new product first. And so you really, and this is typically not captured historically. And again, we're skirting that part about measuring with a micrometer. If you really want to account for all this, for all that's happening here, do you want to account for it, or is it just complexity that's just too hard? So essentially, you don't know the remaining in the system. You don't know the remaining shelf life of existing stock. And part of and if you want to account for it, there's just a repetition of what we saw before. You'd actually need two-dimensional histograms over here that also include the vintage of the product, the best buy product. How much do you have of each vintage? How much do people buy of each vintage? And you can get lost in the weeds very quickly. One recent development or ongoing development that might make matters better here is this movement from these barcodes. Everybody knows these barcodes down here. There's the same cheese, and now we're looking at the barcodes. The barcodes only encode the article number, the EAN, for instance, a European article number. And people are moving towards these two-dimensional barcodes, and not barcodes anymore, they're QR codes essentially. Those can encode much more information. Those can encode the specific best buy date of a particular product, of a particular unit. And that's kind of a game changer, because now we figure out how much do we still have on stock, because we know what's been sold up to IRI, always IRI. And we can also monitor the customer FIFO, LIFO behavior. And then we can forecast that out, and perhaps that differs. And in prepackaged strawberries, it may be different. In cheese, I don't really care so much whether it's the freshest cheese that I buy. The older cheese might even have a little more character here. And essentially, these best buy dates for cheese, they're not so important. But for strawberries, of course, it makes much more of a difference here. A problem here is always, now we're talking about change management. It requires changes across the entire system. The CPG, the consumer products manufacturer, needs to actually capture these things here. They need to change their processes. The point of sale and the backend storage systems need to account for that, and that actually blows up the amount of data that you need to store over the time series. So the question really is it worth it? And the forecasting models and stock control need to keep track of it and account for it in some reasonable way. And then always the question is this added complexity, is it worth it? Or where do we want the complexity, and where is the complexity just too much? And our customers, even in the area of cloud, in the era of cloud, they still are complain about too much data storage, because even in the cloud, storage costs time, costs money, and retailers have a lot of data. And so the question really is it worth it? We actually have 5 minutes time, so I'm going to talk about distribution centers. So when you're a retailer, you have the store, and we've been looking at the store mostly, and that's what most people associate with retail. But the retailers also have distribution centers. One step back. Don't see those are big boxes somewhere on the Autobahn, on the motorway. And that's an interesting thing, and that's something that I've been looking at for the last time. What do we see here? We see 10 different time series. Actually, they're not so different because the black lines are identical. The black lines are the orders of one stock keeping unit at one DC aggregated over multiple stores. So this DC supplies hundreds of stores with this product. It's kind of a glue stick, essentially. And those are the sales in packages, right? So these numbers here are packages. It doesn't matter. The red lines that differ from row to row, those are forecasts from the aggregated forecasts from the stores. The stores can forecast, I'm going to order. They're not forecast, they are forecasting customer demand. And then they do their ordering, and then they forecast, okay, now that I've ordered today, I can forecast what's going to happen in the future. And then I as a store can forecast how much I'm going to order at the next order date and the one after that. So it's an order forecast, right? Every store does that for each SKU. We aggregate them per SKU over stores, and that gives us this red line down here. And the top one, that's the 1 day ahead order forecast. You see that tracks, or that's a very good fit with the actual order 1 day later. This one is the order forecast, the red line, the order forecast 2 days ahead, 3 days, 4 days. And you see how the order forecast gets worse and worse. This down here is a 10-day ahead order forecast. Why is that important? Well, the DC typically has much longer replenishment cycles. So we may order on Monday, get product on Thursday, and the next order, the next availability date might be on Thursday next. So we need 10 days. Today's order needs to last us for 10 days. And if we rely on these order forecasts and the order forecasts are wrong, then we have a bit of a problem. Right? And we see actually two different problems in these time series here. One is the one up here. It's kind of blatant what's happening here. This is rather obvious. The supplier was not able to supply the DC with product. The DC was therefore not able to send product out to the stores, and stores went out of stock. And the stores started ordering and to fill up again. And since more and more stores went out of stock, these orders increased over time. You see the day of week pattern here on Sundays. This is probably a Sunday. You just don't have any orders that leave the DC on Sunday. But apart from that, it just goes up and up and up. And at some point, the supplier again was able to send product to the DC, and the DC sent out to the stores. And then we went back to normal behavior down here. And the question really is, okay, what do we do with that? We don't want to keep this in our forecast in the DC because it doesn't make sense. It's not actual demand that the DC has. It's an artifact of the supplier not being able to send anything out. And also the order forecast doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, why is the order forecast so low down here? Well, each store says, okay, I don't have any product. No problem, I'm going to order it. And then next time, I'm probably not going to order anything because that one carton that I just ordered, it's going to last me store for 4 weeks. I'm not going to order anything next time. And so the order forecasts say low. And it's just that a few days and then they order. And then nothing arrives because the DC was not able to fulfill the demand because the DC didn't have any stock. And so the store is completely surprised and said, okay, I don't have any stock. And the next time I can order this, I can only order stuff like this, perhaps once a week, twice a week. Next time I order this, I'm going to order a whole bunch of that. And more stores do that. And so 3 days ahead, 4 days ahead, more and more stores say, okay, next time I can order this, I'm going to order a lot of things. And that is why this aggregated order forecast becomes much better as a predictor nearer to the fact. One other thing that we see is this bump here. We have a 2-day bump. And that's interesting. We talked to the customer, and that's kind of a promotion available in the system itself. And so the stores don't see, I'm going to have a promotion, I'm going to sell more product, and therefore the order, this red line stays low. The store automatically doesn't see I'm going to order more. What happens is at some point this promotion runs, the store sells more, probably runs out of stock, and suddenly all these stores need to refill their inventory, and suddenly they find out, oh, we've been having a promotion that just only today occurred to me. Next time I can order this product, I'm going to order a lot. And all the stores do that, and suddenly 3 days before they can order, they start sending out this kind of advance notice, this order forecast. I'm going to order a lot the next time I can order. Unfortunately, that's just 3 days before the fact, and the DC may be completely surprised by that if their replenishment cycles don't align with that. And so you get all kinds of interesting effects in here. We're almost out of time, so I'm not going to go through the entire table here that I have where the retail store differs fundamentally, and not just in terms of volume, but really fundamentally from the retailer distribution center, where the retailer distribution center is somewhere in the middle between a retail store and a normal distribution center from a wholesaler or something else. You still have promotions that can inform the retailer DC and so on. So there's lots of things here. So conclusions, stock control is hard. Perishables make life even harder. Retail DCs are also hard. But you can overcomplicate things. And that is, there's always a kind of a temptation to overcomplicate things and to model everything. And at some point you run into the bias variance trade-off. Very hard to explain to practitioners that don't know about statistics. Usually the art is lying in in identifying where do I need to work, what do I need to work on next. So more research is needed. I know that many people in this call will like to hear that. Also a translation into practice. And essentially, I'm calling here to, in terms of inventory control in retail, the key is this idea of searching for your key under the lamp, because the light is better there, and the key is probably more data issues and process issues, and not so much applying yet another foundational agentic relativistic transformer to the M5 dataset, because honestly, I'm kind of bored at seeing yet more 1% gains in forecast accuracy. Only took more than 1 more minute too much. So thank you so much. Aris, back to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Stephan. We have about 9 more minutes. There are a few questions that have come through. I'm going to make a start. Then for any further comments or questions, just please post them in the chat or in the Q&A box. Stephan, that was absolutely terrific. Thank you very much again. I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of everybody. Let me make a start. There was an earlier comment about machine learning, obviously, partly at least expected. So could you tell us just a little bit about to what extent you rely upon machine learning methodologies, or to what extent, I mean, you think that they are useful, or to what extent there is scope for further improving what is currently happening for retail applications? Thank you very much.
Machine learning, well, the first thing is, of course, you need to define what machine learning is, because people have been calling ordinary least squares machine learning, and I've been guilty of that. There's an enormous amount of hype here. And, well, what we do is actually we're using rather simple statistical approaches. Actually, we're looking at machine learning. The problem is that we're a software manufacturer, and we provide standard software to the market. And we have customers that have been using our software for 10 years, 20 years, or something like that. If you tell them we'll stop supporting the existing systems because we need to invest resources in putting together as I said, a foundational agentic relativistic transformer, and to make forecasts better, then they'll not like that very much, because they would rather have us, or they want us to continue supporting what they have. And any piece of, any developer, any data scientist, any AI expert that's doing something else is not available to support them. So it can make sense if the forecast accuracy is so much better. And as I said, the forecast accuracy is really not what we're mostly interested in. It's more the stock position at the end. And so far, honestly, even if the forecast accuracy is better, once you round to full logistical units, the stock position is not so much better. So that's one thing here. I'm a mathematician by training, actually. I love these things. It's just that the business value is not immediately obvious. That's point one. Point two is, most unfortunately, let me just skip back. All right, so these little lines here, you see how this crucially depends on having full probability masses, the future predictive density functions, essentially. Much of machine learning forecasting has by now turned into, okay, we're going to forecast the expectation and certain quantiles, and that's a different thing. We still need to, because we need to have these convolutions in stock control later on. The quantiles only give us half the range, essentially. We need to turn that into actual full probability mass functions. And happily, we have a very bright master student who is a bachelor student who is doing exactly that for us right now. And that kind of puts in another moving part where things can get worse or can get better. And so this is my little part about calling for action. Please, people, do not just look at quantiles, just also look at full predictive densities, and because those are just more useful for the actual use later on. Did that answer the question? I hope so.
Absolutely, absolutely. And following on from that, I think there is a very natural follow-up talking about forecasting and talking about the interface with inventory. We have a lovely question about the actual loss functions then. Would you have any recommendations then for researchers, more junior researchers, research in general? What sort of loss functions should go about exploring to address that interface? Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, it's nice that you specified loss functions for researchers, because for researchers, I would absolutely.
Well, you go
You have
ahead and you
practitioners,
should.
you have researchers. Yeah. Well, I personally am a big fan of, as I said, full predictive densities, because we just use them and need them for our convolutions. How do you assess full predictive densities? You use proper scoring functions, proper scoring rules. So there's multiple ones of those, and the continuous or non-continuous rank probability score, that's probably state of the art currently, and the energy score, that's something that you use to assess the quality of such a full predictive density. Problem here is that's very unintuitive, and I'm going to give another presentation in 3 weeks in Karlsruhe where I'm going to talk about exactly this, and I'm unfortunately going to say that no practitioner has ever used those, at least none that I have ever talked to, so more transfer into practice is needed. That said, for practitioners, well, what you don't want to use is the MAPE, for instance, because you would divide by zero. Division by zero is an unsolved problem in modern mathematics. You also don't want to use anything that's mean absolute error oriented, because that elicits conditional medians. You do want to look at stuff like quantile losses, pinball losses. That's typically useful. Always hard to compare these between products that have very different movement classes, very fast movers, very slow moving products, important, unimportant products. So I could, believe me, I could talk for another 2 hours about the sheer fact of forecast quality measures, and nobody wants that, I think. Invite me again.
Absolutely. Maybe we have time to squeeze in 2 quick questions. So the first one, you talked about the problems with capturing cost or cost structures, or however you summarize that. How do you address that when you come to see the interface with the service level? So what, do you have any quick suggestion for for all of us as to how to address this inability to capture costs or cost structures? And obviously all of us, we are preoccupied with high service levels in retail and in business in general. How do you balance the two?
Very, very hard. And honestly, I've given up.
Sure.
No, seriously. Our customers typically say they have a target service level, and we just have a cost service level inventory trade-off curves. And that's what you work on. And then you have to keep IRI in mind, and the translation of all these costs here into a target service level. That's a completely unintuitive and very hard endeavor. And I don't think anybody has a very good solution to that, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Perhaps for 1 more minute, if you don't mind, and then I have some closing remarks. Any advice for the more junior people attending this webinar today, both in industry and academia, about promising lines of further research, promising lines of inquiry? That would be wonderful, given your experience and everything, just to possibly summarize that if you can for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, very hard, because it's much easier to apply yet another deep neural network to M5 data. That's very easy. You just sit in your office and you hack it together and you write your paper afterwards. And that's easy, and it's boring, honestly. It bores me, and it's not relevant for practice. What's relevant for practice is probably more process oriented. Is there a way to quantify where do we need to invest time and resources in next? Do we need to clean up data? Do we need to improve the in-store processes? That would be a very worthwhile endeavor. It's just very hard. I don't see how that can be published. I think it's important, but it's just harder to assess for a reader review and for an editor to publish stuff like that, because it's inherently quantifiable or harder to quantify. That's the one thing. And otherwise, yeah, the relationship between what I find very important is the research on inventory record inaccuracy that you're doing. So that's very important, because it's more prevalent than people think about. More research into the substitution behavior of customers would be very useful for retail. How the substitution depend on the retail format, on the product itself, on brand perception. So you're starting to veer into marketing here. That's important. And that's actually, I don't think that's what people in inventory research would like to hear. But I honestly think that the low-hanging fruit in forecasting and in inventory optimization, much of that has been plucked. And now we need to kind of get on our toes and find the higher hanging fruit. And actually, yeah, here's my email address. Anybody who's interested in that or in the slides, just send me an email. I'm happy to talk to pretty much anybody about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephan. Thank you very much. I'm sure, again, I talk on behalf of the entire community and everybody who attended the seminar. Thanks for the wonderful and very informative and very useful seminar. And I hope it goes some way to bridge the gap between academia and industry in inventory research, which is obviously extremely important. Thank you very much for your time. Just before we close, please, I mentioned earlier on the International Symposium for Inventories Research that is going to take place later in August in Budapest. It's an absolutely terrific event. If you haven't attended, please consider joining us later in Budapest for that. The abstract submission is still open, and Anita from ISIR will send out both the presentation, Stephan's presentation, and some more information about abstract submission. And with that, again, thank you very much all for joining us. Massive thanks again to Stephan for his time, and have a wonderful day all. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Stephan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.